It's 2018, the new year, the Duke Cross Brothers, the Sports Warriors, live right here. Sean, it's been an incredible ride all in 2017, doing things differently, changing the script, flipping the game. That's what we do. 2018 should be no different. And we're going to start off first with a big bang that has shaken the MMA world. And that is Big John McCarthy retiring from refereeing and joining the Bellator team.
It was one of those things that I've been debating back and forth on what my feelings were about Big John McCarthy going to commentary and what this means for the fight game. And my initial reaction to it was, well, good for Big John, but also bad for everybody else. And bad for everybody else because it seems like Bellator is doing much what ESPN does, what Fox Sports does, what a lot of avenues are starting to do, which is that if you're in the media, if you're a media personality, or if you're in the radio, it doesn't matter what field you're in. If you're a retiring athlete who has some type of chops, you're going to find a gig a lot easier than, say, somebody that's trying to come up through the rankings and want to do it for a living and just seemingly get passed over time and time again by former athletes. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily a good thing. It just depends on who's in your way, I guess it is, if you look at it. And when you look at Big John, this could go one of two ways. He has commentated him before. He commentated for Affliction. So he has some type of background. He's a podcaster. So it'd be interesting to see what his chops are and how entertaining he is to the fan. Because my concern with that, as much as probably everybody else, is that when you get involved in this, you want to be entertaining. You don't want to be dull. You don't want to be stale. And that's the thing you got to worry about when you see these athletes coming from the field and thinking, oh, I can go ahead and commentate, or I can go ahead and say this and it's going to be entertaining. No, you may think you have an entertaining voice, but it may not be entertaining to everybody else. The one red flag that caught me off guard was when he went on an interview and said that he was being brought in to educate the fans on how officiating is and how to referee a fight. To me, you can bring him in all you want. If I look at the other side of this game and I look at the officiating, why do I want him to educate me on officiating? Any common fan that watches mixed martial arts already knows about officiating. Why do you think there's so many casual fans that try to judge fights? Because they think they know the rules efficiently. So why are they going to sit back and go, well, why do I need somebody to tell me how I feel like I want to judge during a fight? That's not fair to the fight fans,
right? And
that's not going to be entertaining to the fight fans.
And the issue that I always have with people that come from a environment like that and come from a background strategically, you know, if we're talking about football or we're talking about baseball or we're talking about mixed martial arts, it's all relatively the same. And my issue is always about, you know, outsider's perspective. Yes, we have a background in this. Yes, we know what we're talking about. But at the end of the day, we have different perspective. We have a different understanding for the game. It's weird because when you sit behind a microphone and just because you play the sport doesn't necessarily mean that you can talk the sport. And to me, that's always been two different things. That when people are always like, oh, well, they played the sport so they could talk about it. Not all the time, because for some odd reason, transitioning from a sport that you play and your knowledge of what you play is totally different when you get behind a mic.
It is. And it's just like people saying, oh, just because you are a superstar athlete, it means you're going to transition to being a good coach. That's not always the case.
See, Wayne Gretzky, when he retired, went behind the bench for the Phoenix Coyotes, he was not a great coach. He was not an over-the-top coach. Nick Saban tried his hand in the NFL, was not a great NFL coach, because some people are just meant to stay within the lines. But the thing that also gets me too is that I get why Big John did this, because in July he had a neck surgery because of an injury that he suffered while training. So I get it that, we've always said this. When your time is up in the sport,
your body's going to tell you.
Time is up in the sport.
And your body's going to tell you when enough's enough. And when you have 2 surgeries because of this injury, you have to sit back and do basically a self-evaluation of where you're going. And if it's going to hamper you in the octagon, in the ring, wherever it may be, from moving a certain way to get yourself into certain positions, then he is right to bail out and go, you know what, I'm going to probably retire from reffing full-time, and this is what I'm going to do full-time. And when your issue is your neck and you're trying to look lateral and you're trying to get in the best position and you can no longer move your neck the way that you need to as a ref, yeah, I'm all for it, dude. Bow out. Because your health in that sport, it's going to start deteriorating, and you will no longer be the same referee that many people rant and raved about in this sport. When we first started in this field and got to meet Big John McCarthy on multiple occasions.
Yep.
Great dude.
Even his kids.
And you talk about Big John, I couldn't have thought of a better person to make the transition. You just got to look at both sides of the spectrum and not just say, yeah, you know what, Big John's going to do great. I didn't hear him on Affliction, because when Affliction, by the time I got into this game, Affliction was long gone.
Yep.
I heard about it, saw some on tape, just didn't get a chance to really follow because it was mostly on pay-per-view. But if you guys out there think that Big John's going to do great for Bellator replacing Jimmy Smith, go ahead. Like the video. Show some hearts, whatever you guys want to do. Show us which way you guys are leaning with Big John McCarthy joining Bellator family. Is he going to be better than what Jimmy Smith was for Bellator? That's the big question. That's big shoes to fill for Big John. So if Big John's up for the task, everybody's going to be watching. Everybody's going to be making sure, because you know how much everybody scrutinized Sean Grande when he came over from talking about basketball and saying, well, this isn't going to go over well. This is not going to be entertaining. Well, he lasted a little longer than many people thought. Now it'll be interested to see how this one lasts, how this transitions.
Yeah.
So for me, I hope for the best for Big John. And I want to see Big John do big things for Bellator and commentating and bringing a little bit of a different swagger to it. But please, don't educate the fans. Just talk about the insides of the game, inside perspective, and you'll gain more viewers.
And Big John will also be making his debut at Bellator 192 and 193, respectively. He'll be along the sides. He'll be joining a team that includes Chelson, Marnero, Ranello, and Goldberg. I can only think the positivity behind this is that they're going to move in the right direction. So all I can do is hold my judgment, wait till it. But if you think this is a good idea, like Sean said, show thumbs up, thumbs down for if you think this is a good job for Bellator. If you love it, hit the heart button. In the meantime, Sean, we're going to take a quick break and come back. We are the Ducross Brothers Sports Warriors. I'm Tristan Ducross. Along my side, as always, is my partner, Sean Ducross. We're going to take a quick break, and then we got our breakdown of UFC Fight Night 124. Little Heathen Stevens versus Do Ho Choi. And it looks like time is running out on both of them. More with the Ducross Brothers coming up next.
You're listening to Sean and Tristan Across the Sports Warriors. Check us out on Facebook Live and YouTube on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or you can visit our website at www.ducrossbrothers.com.
All right, everybody. We are live right here. I'm Tristan Ducross. On my side, as always, is my partner in crime, the one and only Sean Ducross. We are the Sports Warriors every Wednesday right here. Sean, UFC Fight Night has always been a sticky point for me because they have so many fights. But here it comes down to a main event that leaves a lot of people talking about whether or not it's a good main event or not. Because you have Little Heated Stevens versus Doo-Ho Choi, and one is trying to fight against time to stop, because if time runs out, he's gone to South Korea's military service. That's Choi. Time's running out on Little Heated Stevens to get into a spot where he can earn a title shot because he's 0-2 in main events. He's coming off a win that is suspect at best because he beat an agent and past his prime, Gilbert Melendez.
You're talking about trying to stop time, or in this case, the title of the show is Defiant.
Be defiant, right?
Joe, you got Jeremy Stevens, who's being very defiant in the sense that thinking that he is capable of fighting at the elite level. But when you look at a guy who's been around the game as long as he has, 31 years old, suffered 10 losses via decision, he either goes for broke or he goes out on his shield. Stevens begins to adopt that moniker. Is he a gatekeeper? Is he the guy that still has the name recognition that you can go ahead and slide up and make a name for yourself? Or is it just simply another one of those things that he's here? Choi's an interesting character because you look at him and you're like, wow. He's not a fighter that you would think that would put on highlight reel fights. But he won the 2016 Fight of the Year.
And he's gone for a year.
14-2. The guy has a 79% finish rate. 79. Stevens is no slouch himself, finishing 17 opponents via TKO or KO. This guy has the power to knock your head off into Never Neverland or make you look like a bobblehead. So if you're looking for the fight of the night, if Choi comes out the same way that he did in his last fight, fight fans are going to have a doozy on their hands for this one, and you wouldn't want anything different for a main event than what you're going to get from Choi and Stevens. Somebody's going to sleep. Somebody better get a pillow ready because they're going to need to slide underneath one of their heads. So if you're looking for a slobber knocker, you're going to get one right here in this one. Because both guys finish him, and Fox Sports 1, UFC Fight Night is going down. The one that makes me wonder about why this fight is even happening is Vitor Belfort versus Uriah Hall. Again, I have this simply titled Jekyll and Hyde.
Between both of them.
Yeah, because you don't know which one you're going to get. If you're going to get the vintage Vitor Belfort, or you're going to get the guy that's just like, yeah, I'm here, and then watch him get knocked out. Uriah Hall is the same way. Mr. Flash in the pan. Or you get the guy that thinks that he didn't need to train in his camp that 1 week, and then bam, he gets knocked out. If Belfort loses here, what's next for him?
It's called Bellator.
He was supposed to retire last fight. But then he won his fight against Nate Marquardt.
And it postponed all said talks.
And then took this fight against Uriah Hall. Really? So what is it? When is your time going to come to call it a career, Vitor Belfort? And yes, you mentioned about going across the bout to Bellator. But you can't forget about the rumors that you're hearing in the community with Legends of the Cage. You see it all over Facebook. We know Brian Moore. He wants to create a Legends division, what Vitor Belfort has been begging for.
So then why not? Why not jump over across there?
So the fight game can vastly change and vastly alter. But we will talk about that coming up shortly with the Ali Act, as you're talking about things that can change and alter the landscaping of MMA. Now, if Legends of the Cage can continue to do what they want to do and achieve their success
by changing the world, by changing the landscape of mixed martial arts, that's a right step, ain't it?
Yeah, and it will continue to transition and continue to grow. So in the next several months, maybe even a year, what we know as MMA may completely shift styles or reform something else. So you look at Vitor Belfort and Uriah Hall, it's an interesting, which one of them, if one of them wins, one of them stays. One of them loses, one of them goes home. By that meaning is that you leave UFC, or does UFC continue to use Vitor Belfort, Uriah Hall as leverage for names, as gatekeepers, and keep them in the middle of the pack, so that way at the end of the day, all these other up-and-comers have names that they can go ahead and add to the resume, whether they're on the downside or on the upside. It'll be interesting to see how this fight plays out, and trust me, there's going to be some people that are going to be looking at this fight and watching it very closely. The other fight, too, that many people are interested in, and one for me, is the fact that Michael Johnson got beat so bad by Justin Gaethje that he dropped all the way down to featherweight. Once a guy who was touted as a good lightweight got beat up so bad by Justin Gaethje, and he said, you know what? I'm just going to drop down in weight. I'm going to go down to featherweight. But then he runs into a buzzsaw in Darren Elkins, who's on a 5-fight win streak. At some point, you guys got to call it a time's up here and realize that you can't be jostling for positioning as much.
I want to know what people are thinking right now about UFC Fight Night 124. Thumbs up if you're looking for it. Thumbs down if you're not looking for it. Heart it if you love it. Because to me, this is kind of like a hidden gem if you think about it, about this card.
Very much so.
Because
I think people are sleeping on this fight card, and they should not be sleeping on it.
Dude, you mentioned Michael Johnson's on this card. You mentioned Vitor Belfort's on the card.
Jeremy Stevens
is on this card. Paige Van Zandt is coming back, and she's on this card against a rock star in Jessica Rose Clark. Like, that matchup, I have Rose Clark beating Paige Van Zandt. If that happens, that's going to be an incredible feat. Then you look and let's talk about a guy named Thiago Alves. He's on this card. Jessica I's on this card. And the hidden gem of them all, the crown, the coup de grace, Usman versus Emil Weber Meek. If nobody knows who Meek is, go to YouTube.
He's the one. I've heard of Meek before.
He's the one that in 45 seconds dismantled Polaris.
That's where I've heard of him.
The guy, heel hook.
Yeah, the guy that beat up on Polaris overseas, right?
Yes. He's the one that dismantled and probably ultimately ended the career of Polaris to never be the same again. Meek is making his debut against Usman. And people are giving no credit to Meek because a lot of people don't know who he is or what he's about. But, man, make no mistake about it. 45-second victory over Polaris. He earned a contract with the UFC to make his debut.
See, and then you look across the bow, you look at Usman, and Usman's 11-fight win streak.
Right. But the thing is about Usman is that he's not overly exciting. Here's a guy that 4 out of 6 fights, this guy has done nothing to establish what he has done in his career, except for continuing to take people to the distance. Meek doesn't want none of that. I expect a stand-up, bang-em-out brawl between the both of them, because I don't see Usman taking this to the ground. I think he wants to establish himself as a bruiser in that division, in that welterweight division. And there is no better way to set these two guys up. This is going to be a fight where people are going to be like, I might have to just pause and wait.
See, and you again, the name of the show is Defiant, and here you're looking at Usman trying to be very defiant to the UFC. Like, how much more are you guys going to put me down,
right? You're
and not give me a shot,
star, and you're giving me basically a softball guy that you think is a softball guy,
but yet I've ran off 11 wins.
And I get a non-ranked guy, a debuter in the UFC, and that's okay. That's what you're about.
That's not fair to Usman.
I would be pissed if I'm Usman. I'm like, dude, I'm going to run right through him. I'm going to show you why you should have gave me a top guy. I'm going to show you why in the welterweight division I'm that guy. So I give all the credit to Usman for what he's about to do, or Meek. But again, I'm looking at this card as the Defiant ones, and I think Choi is going to beat Stevens. I think Jessica Rose Clark is going to beat Paige Van Zandt. I believe Meek is going to shock the world and it's going to end the hype train.
So you're going for every underdog on this card?
Because I'm Defiant.
So if you love Tristan going for all the underdogs, show him some love. Throw out some hearts.
Right.
Because this guy's going to need a lot of love when his ego gets blasted, when the underdogs don't come out on top. Paige Van Zandt gets back on the right track. Choi, though, I do agree, will beat Stevens. I agree with that one. And then I believe that Usman goes on and wins again and goes 12.
I'm telling you, man, this is the card that everybody should be mentioning about for the UFC.
Don't sleep.
You can't sleep on this card. Like, I'm always for the one that you look for a card and be like, okay, how can you sell this? How can you spin this, right? And some of the cards that UFC puts out, you're like, dude, seriously? You're just putting out a card just to put out a card because you have 500,000 fighters, and that's what they do. But here, finally, we're going to get a fight night that is worthy of everybody talking. Paige Van Zandt loses, this will be her last fight. Oh, without a doubt. Go to dancing. See ya. The world doesn't stop for anybody. It just keeps moving. And that door is going to continue to open for newcomers. Look up Rose Clark's last fight, dude. She is no joke. So it's going to be interesting to see where that fight goes and where that fight leads. But
what fight that led to something or led to a little bit more discussion is that we had just gotten off of UFC 219 Cyborg vs. Holly Holm. We didn't get a chance to do the show prior or after that. But here's something that's interesting that came out of it, okay? We all know Cyborg won. But what I was surprised about that fight was the fact that Cyborg, much improved in her boxing, beat Holly Holm at her own game.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the Holly Holm that you saw that beat up on Ronda Rousey. You're beginning to wonder what's left in the tank for Holly Holm. How hungry was she for this fight? Because at some times, I swore, I think Holly Holm was checking out mentally in that fight when she could not get to Cyborg or was getting tagged like she had no idea Cyborg had that much raw power.
Again, brother, the one thing that I look at, too, with Holly Holm is that she's a point boxer. And that came out to an issue that I saw in this fight was that as a point boxer, yes, you have to establish your distance. But when you don't have any power to finish off something, or you're one-dimensional fighter against a premier striker and a premier fighter like a Cyborg, a lot of the questions come up now to whether or not where does Holly Holm go from here? Not just where Cyborg goes from here. What happens to Holly Holm? Does she go down to 135? Does she go down to bantam? What happens? Because the way that I see this now going is that, man, Holly Holm is no longer the same fighter. And I've said this for years about Cyborg. You step across that cage, you put it all on the line. Just know that you'll never come out the same fighter again. Well, and I think that's where we're going to see Holly Holm. We're going to see now Holly Holm that is just a shell of herself. We'll see a Holly Holm that might be the best opportunity for her is at 135, not 145. I give her the props for her to move up. People are saying, well, what about Amanda Nunes for the next title for Cyborg? That's never going to happen. That's never going to happen.
It will happen. And again, it'll happen because of what we're going to talk about coming up after the next break, Tristan. It's going to happen. The changing of the landscape of MMA, whether people want to believe it, it's on the cusp. So Amanda Nunes versus Cyborg is potentially the inevitable. But before we get there, we must get to the next version. And the next version, the next opportunity for Cyborg is, hey, you know what? You've got to go ahead and compete against Megan Anderson. But that raised red flags. I don't
like that Megan Anderson fight. Like, granted, Megan Anderson's 145. Cool. All the power to her. She's a beast in her own right. But that's a mismatch and a half. That is a fight that I don't want to see. There is no other outcome that I see that Megan Anderson can give her the fight of her life. For the first time, dude, for the first time, we talking about who's next for Cyborg. It ain't Megan Anderson. Theoretically, there's only one fight that makes sense, and it's Amanda Nunes versus Cyborg. I just don't see that happening. I don't. You know, Megan Anderson has had issues with USADA and everything else like that, man. I just don't see that this is a good fight.
And I was trying to think, is it a good fight? Is it not a good fight? Because Miesha Tate came out and said she shouldn't be fighting for the title.
No.
But again, when you look at the 145-pound division, there is nobody left. Megan Anderson is the Invicta 145 champion.
But okay,
there is nobody left. There is no fault. The fault, if there's anybody to blame, Tristan, it's just a simple fact that there is no 145-pound women left that is capable of fighting at an elite level at this point.
I think all the 145ers, the real legit 145ers, are all in Bellator.
That's even a weak division.
You created a division basically to hand
Cyborg the title.
Hand Cyborg the title and glorify her as the best premier fighter, women's 145er in the history of anything. And in order to do that, you had to give her a title. There's nobody 145.
I'm still saying that at the end of the day,
please,
yes.
Can we get Erin Tohill out of retirement, stick her in the octagon against Chris Cyborg? Love this.
A fight that should have happened about 10 years ago.
Absolutely. But have you seen the training that Erin Tohill has been doing? The amount of work that she puts in daily.
What? One of her girls just went to Invicta a couple months ago. So it's there. It's whether the UFC is going to do something that ballsy. But again,
share it, love it. Hit all your buttons all at the bottom. I don't care. Erin Tohill versus Cyborg is the only legit 145 fight that should be made. Just saying.
Because this fight should have happened back at Strikeforce.
Most definitely.
But you look at everything that's going over it. So by default, the last woman standing in a weak division is Megan Anderson. Whether she deserves it or not, whether she gets popped by USADA or not.
Dude, she's going to get destroyed.
Doesn't matter.
I like Megan Anderson. I just don't.
Bottom line, she's the last woman standing. If this fight goes down, which is not going to go down for UFC 221, She was adamant about that the card was already full.
Dude, she's not even calling for the fight. Like, she ain't even out there talking about this fight. So it makes me wonder if she even actually wants this fight. Like, that's what we're talking about. Megan Anderson, last dog standing. She ain't even hunting, dude.
And at some point, you got to hunt. You got to go out there and you got to go hunt for the fights that you want instead of watching people run. And that's where you come back to Khabib. You talk about Tony Ferguson hunting. Tony Ferguson hunts every day on social media. He pokes at every person because he wants to eat.
Yep.
And when you see that, you've got Khabib who sits back and it's like, oh, wait, I'm injured. Oh, wait, I can't do this. Oh, wait, I can't do that. Something's going on. I can't make this weight, but I can fight when I want to fight over here. The thing about Khabib is that he's perhaps one of the most scariest gifted athletes we've seen in combat sports, in MMA.
Dude, he brutalized.
The fact that he is 25-0 and destroyed
Edson Barboza, who was significantly a bigger fighter.
And you look at that and you watch his ground and pound being so ferocious.
Dude, if you get beat physically and mentally in a fight, that dogfight is over with.
Yeah, so...
But if you put him against Tony Ferguson and Khabib, I don't care what anybody says, this is a match of the century. People will want to see this fight and who comes out on top. You got one side, one left side that is pro-Tony. The other side, pro-Khabib. Make no mistake about it, though, that somewhere in there, Sean, you have Conor McGregor's name thrown in there.
Because Conor McGregor is still the champion at lightweight. And you look at everything and you're saying, well, hold up, wait a second. Why are we even talking about Conor McGregor? Again, we're going to get to that right after the break. Because all this ties into being how defined do you want to be? How much do you want to go against the grain? Against what's being presented in front of you that you inevitably do not have the chance to completely stop. But Khabib calls out everybody.
He will take on both men
at the same time.
In one night, the same time, it don't matter. Khabib has one thing. He wants to shut up all his haters and his doubters that he can't fight, that he can't fight or make weight.
You know,
25-0 says he can fight. He made weight, folks. This is a bad dude, and I would not want, if I'm UFC, the worst matchup, Khabib versus Conor.
The worst matchup may be Tony Ferguson versus Khabib. My now question is that if at this point in time, if you can't get him to fight Tony Ferguson on the dotted line, if you cannot make that fight, then you know what? Who's to say that he doesn't drop down to featherweight? There's some guys that would make an interesting fight over there. Who wouldn't want to see Max Holloway versus Khabib? Who wouldn't want to see a Frankie Edgar versus Khabib? Or can he really puff up, because he is 5'10", to welterweight? Tyrone Woodley, Lawler, Dos Anjos. The list goes on.
What about
you could potentially see Khabib take on some bigger names that make you go, I wouldn't mind seeing that fight.
I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. Right now to the Sports Warriors, the Ducross Brothers. Yes, we're back in 2018, and we're knocking this sucker out of the ballpark. Khabib, though, what about Khabib versus Eddie Alvarez? If none of those two fights happen, Sean, what about a Khabib versus an Eddie Alvarez?
That would be an interesting fight as well. There are a number of fights that you could possibly look and go, well, let's see what we can do here. What about Justin Gaethje versus Khabib? Lightweight.
See, that would be an interesting fight because Justin Gaethje is a push forward type fighter. And he wants to trade and bang with the best of them. So after we just saw Edison Barboza get destroyed by Khabib, I don't think he's ever going to be the same fighter. Just saying. We saw what the Rory McDonald and Robbie Lawler took years off of both fighters. I think the same thing Khabib did to Edison Barboza. Just took years right off his career. I see that issue coming down the line with Justin Gaethje if he continues to fight his style. But I wouldn't trade it for the world to get a Khabib versus Justin Gaethje.
I don't think anybody would do that.
Pay-per-view, yes, sir.
But I just don't want to see that. If I'm going to see Justin Gaethje compete at a high level again, I don't want to see him put in work like he did against Eddie Alvarez. That was one of the most disappointing fights I think I've ever seen him in, and even Eddie Alvarez in. They were both gassed out before the second round was ever over. If you wanted to see two guys huffing and puffing and asking for a walker, it was one of those two guys. You wonder why Justin Gaethje got knocked out.
See, and that's the interesting tidbit, but we are going to a break. When we come back out of it, what is the future of Conor McGregor? The Ali Act in 2018, will it make its presence? More with the Sports Warriors, Sean and Tristan Ducross. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Sean and Tristan Ducross, the Sports Warriors. Check us out on Facebook Live and YouTube on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or you can visit our website at www.ducrossbrothers.com.
All right, everybody, we are back. We are your boys for the evening. I'm Tristan Ducross. Along my side is my partner in crime, the one and only. Yes, we look alike, but that's Sean Ducross. We are the Ducross Brothers Sports Warriors, a combat sports talk show with opinions and facts backed into one. We don't sugarcoat anything. We come at you 100, Sean, and that is exactly what the Ali Act is all about. You keep it 100, and that's what the Ali Act is about. And it looks like that it's going to be coming at some point in 2018.
I'm surprised why not a lot of people have wanted to touch about the Ali Act. Because when the Ali Act has been around since 1999,
no promoter wants to touch it.
In boxing. This is how, in boxing, part of the reason why you know what the purses are, what the percentage of equality is.
Why you know about the A side and the B side.
You know why? Because it's because of the Ali Act. You know about what the revenues are because of the Ali Act. The only thing that the boxing promoters don't like about the Ali Act is the fact that they don't feel like it's completely fair in the ranking system. But that's calling like potato. Rankings have always been far-fetched.
Oh, absolutely.
Rankings have always been flawed. Doesn't matter what it is. It happens because you get so many people, so many governing bodies, and it becomes an issue. So I can see why the Ali Act is an issue in boxing to an extent. But what is great about the Ali boxing is that you're wondering about how come, well, boxers make so much more money. They make this amount. Well, when can MMA get to that level?
I think this helps guide it.
Here's what happened. Here's how we got here. So the Ali Act is due for an extension in which it was presented to Congress towards the end of 2017 for the extension of it by Mark Wayne Mullen, a congressman from Oklahoma.
Known as the H.R. 44.
So, yeah, the extension. And you look at this and you say, well, how is this going to affect MMA? Well, if he has his way, the Ali Act will go into MMA and kickboxing.
Yep.
What this will then do is do much like how we ended up. We, meaning the fans, the media personalities, how we all ended up seeing Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather. We ended up in that particular fight because of the fact that the Ali Act states that you can go ahead and negotiate for a fight and a promoter has no bearings behind you in terms of if you want to negotiate for another said fight. So what we saw was, in fact, Mayweather being his own promoter, not needing to talk to anybody else, and being the fact that Conor McGregor became his own company man.
Yep.
And thus did what he did. Yes, Dana White had some bearings and some pull in the back, but apparently not as much as many people thought.
Right, and I thought that was unique in itself.
Just the fact that he was the name behind McGregor to push the level of the want for this fight. The Ali Act, has rarely been enforced. But when it hasn't been enforced, the key things that it's enforced for are the money, about how you get the A side and the B side, and the revenue. That's what we're talking about here, and how the implications will affect MMA because of the fact that when a said fighter, let's throw out an example, okay? If Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz has another fight, Conor McGregor or Nate Diaz can go to the board and say, well, this guy's getting this amount of money. I want this portion. Yep. That's it. You have legal grounds to dispute any claim that you deem is not in favor of a fighter.
And that's what I was just going to say, is that rarely enforced, sure. I mean, depends on the way you look at it.
And it's rarely enforced.
Principles, though, behind the Ali Act that many people like about the Ali Act, in a nutshell, is that they will have to disclose their dealings with fighters and stakeholders. They will have to divulge the revenue generated by the company, by the gate. This will all have the fighters be able to come to the bargaining table with a piece of paper in hand and say, you want me to fight for you? You want me to fight on your card? Well, last year, Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz did something like $2 million. Just throwing a figure out there. Did $2 million. Well, I believe Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor 3, if it ever happened, would draw significantly more. Well, in order to get those two guys to the negotiating table, they could be like, well, the gate generated this. The revenue generated this. We brought in this. This is what we are owed.
And that's the thing, is
that's where the Ali Act will be enforced.
See, and why the Ali Act struggles in boxing is the fact you've got so many governing bodies.
Oh, absolutely.
The reason why this will work in MMA or kickboxing
there will only be one governing body.
So you look at that, there's a lot of benefits to this, because then you talk about the revenue, you talk about that. So if a fighter comes into the thing and says, well, you know what? Last fight, this revenue, this fight card made this revenue, this amount of money. I got this, this, and this. Okay? Now you know your worth. So now you have something to go back in. So when you look at UFC, and I use UFC because UFC is the prime candidate that is going against the Ali Act and not wanting the extension.
As a company, right.
But they don't want this act because they have a stronghold on the MMA community and the fighters, because of the fact that they have this contract with Reebok. And basically they can dictate their own rankings. They can dictate how a contract is said and done.
Yeah. So
if you bring in the Ali Act and you bring it in, you know your net worth. So if the UFC says, hey, I'm only offering you this, and then you go, well, dude, I did this amount of money. This pay-per-view did this. This pay-per-view did this. So without me, you wouldn't have did this. So I want this amount of money. So basically, the UFC is trying to keep a stranglehold
on their monopoly of the sport, but they're failing to realize that Bellator's coming fast and furious for them. And if they don't turn the script, they will be left behind. It is that simple.
Yeah, and the Ali Act wants to go ahead and create a sanctioning body that from an outside that will rank promotions fighters.
Yeah.
The promotions will not be able to rank their own fighters, And each promotion, if you have a number one contender, will have to fight the number one contender annually. So you can't run and hide.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's not like boxing where you get 5 number one contenders and you can sit in a room and go, well,
he hasn't done much.
I'm going to go ahead and pick the 5th one because he looks like he's the weakest.
You will have to face a mandatory number one.
Yep.
A mandatory number one.
So if anything can happen, the Ali Act stands a better shot at working in kickboxing and MMA than it did in boxing because, quite frankly, there is not 10,000 sanctioning bodies.
Right.
So,
and people always seem to forget that when we're talking about boxing, man, we're talking about multiple sanctioning bodies. We're talking about multiple divisions. We're talking about multiple champions. We need to put a stop to it at some point.
And you know what? If it has any chance of being implemented into the fight game, it's the fact that Randy Couture, Conor McGregor, John Finch, all of these guys are set to testify in front of Congress about the Ali Act, about how we got here. You also got to remember, too, we have a number of MMA associations.
Right. I was thinking about that,
MMA Fighters Association, launched in 2006 by Rob Macy. They were wanting to bring the boxing standards to MMA. Professional Fighters Association, Mixed Martial Arts Association, teased about the idea of a collective bargaining agreement. Well, the Ali Act basically takes all that, balled it up, and threw it out there for everybody else. When it gets to the Congress floor, that's where it is right now. It's on the floor. Whether when it comes up for the bill, it remains to be seen.
Testimony.
Huh?
When is the testimony? When are they standing in front?
We don't know yet. We don't know yet because it hasn't made it yet to where it needs to be to even get talked about. All it knows is that it's already a bill since 1999.
And it was put on the floor as of last year.
It turned into a bill in 1999, went from 1999 to 2016 where it ran up. Now it's due for an extension. They'll put it on the bill floor, has to go through all the other intricacies of how you pass a bill. It's got to go through like 5 stages before it becomes an extension of a bill again. So right now, the extension bill is the HR 44. This one's being presented by Mark Wayne Mullen. He's the gentleman that is fighting for the extension period. So you guys just stay up on the Ali Act because this could forever change how the fight game is viewed and finally maybe getting the fighters the quality of life, the money they truly deserve from the promoters and getting them the closest to make boxing money.
Promoters can no longer hide.
Good luck. Because if this gets passed, promoters and how they pay,
it's going to change. And nobody's going to be able to complain about it. It's going to happen at some point in 2018. Believe it. There's no more changing of the guard. It's only looking for the future in the sport that we all love, that we all back. It is going to happen. Just stay up to date with it. I say everybody should vote for the bill that's going to be coming up because I like it. It's going to be very, very good for the sport.
The fact that when you look at the Ali Act and you're talking about it being on the Congress floor, these people were the people that voted against allowing MMA in New York.
Yep.
So you guys finally pushed that and passed that. Now help the fighters help themselves.
Yep. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%, man. But Legacy Fighting Alliance 30, it's going down over the weekend. And It's headlined by one of our own out here.
Two of our own.
Right.
Ish.
Kind of. Curtis Melinder versus Nick Barnes. Both guys from SoCal, Orange County area. Melinder returns home to the house he built, where he went 7-0 in Costa Mesa at the OC Hangar. Like, this guy ran off so many wins. Finished 2017 undefeated. Wants to set the table for what it means to be an LFA. Gets no pushover, though. Nick Barnes is another guy that has showcased its talent and continued to improve. Both guys tore up the local SoCal, went to Bellator, never faced each other. Now they finally meet at the main event in Orange County.
13-3 versus 12-2. You're looking at the fact that Melinder has now gone on to headline 2 fights, third one coming up, 2-0 already, 3-fight win streak. If he wins, does he finally get his opportunity at a title?
I think he does. I think there's no question about it.
That would be something that would be interesting to see because Nick Barnes is no pushover. He's won 6 fights via submission. This fight's either going to end on the ground or it's going the distance. If it's going the distance, Curtis Melinder is going to win this fight.
Yeah, most definitely.
Or it's going to end in the first 2 rounds with Nick Barnes winning this fight. So you got those two.
Fernando Padilla versus Taliesin Soares.
10-1
That's an exciting featherweight fight. Padilla, 90% stoppage rate in the first round, folks.
100% stoppage rate for Soares.
And somebody going to sleep.
And these two are top of the 2 of the highest level jiu-jitsu practitioners that's out there going right now. And these 2 guys are in the co-main event. So if you're looking for something to watch, dude.
Don't sleep on that. Do not sleep
Check out
on
LFA
that.
30. I wish I would have kept up, but we've been so caught up with our own stuff lately that we forgot that it was right here in Orange County. But this is a high-level fight card just with the co-main event and the main event alone. And to go back here before we go out in a second was that so the HR 44, the expansion of the Muhammad Ali Act right now was introduced January 3rd, 2017. It's in the digital stage as of November 9th, 2017. So it hasn't been officially ordered yet. It hasn't reached the Senate yet. That'll be the next phase. Then if the Senate passes, then President signs off on it. I was just going to say that, yeah, 3 weeks of great MMA events out here in SoCal. It's incredible. Bellator, you got Pachanga. Dude, hey, everybody, who's going to be at the Pachanga Bellator event? Give us a thumbs up because they're going to break in the new ballroom at Pachanga that's supposed to be along the lines of an MGM Grand. Who's not excited for that? That's in our backyard. But in the meantime, Sean, crazy, right? Yeah, it's going to be an interesting fight week. I mean, it's like back to back to back. You got next week, you got January 20th. Then you got this week you have LFA 30. Then the next week you have Bellator 192. Then after that you have Bellator again here at Pachanga. It's like, man, everybody just kept lining up and let's go. Let's get these fights in the new year. Let's bring it in. Let's go hard. Hey, it's one of those things. It's going to be interesting. I mean, you got local MMA coming up. You got Fighters Rep. George Francis and crew is going hard this week this upcoming week.
February 24th, IE Fights is going down in Ontario. That's Lorenz Larkin's group that's putting on fights out here. So, I mean,
David Bramley, Lorenz Larkin and crew over there.
Right. Continue to push forward out here in the local MMA scene, and it's only getting bigger out here in SoCal.
You got to go bigger. You got to go home.
Absolutely.
But Fighters Rep 2 George Francis and crew.
January 13 at Adrenaline MMA in San Bernardino.
So if you guys are around that area, hit them up.
Dude, you need to get to that. Trevor Wells is on that card. Jordan's on that card. If you don't know who Jordan is, he's the one name man. This dude is a legit banger. So I would not want to sleep on him. He's going to put on a show. Trevor Wells is going to put on a show. George Francis and Co.
Duran's on the card.
Right.
Saw that one. I was like, dude, that's a good main event.
Yes. Solid card out of George Francis and company out there as well. But in the meantime, stay up to date with your boys. You can like our Facebook page, Do Cross Brothers. You can friend us on Facebook, just Sean and Tristan.
We don't
Cross,
bite.
Right? We don't bite. You can follow out our website for all the latest news and happenings around the mixed martial arts world. Just go to www.docrossbrothers.com. In the meantime, until next time, we are out of here. I'm Tristan Ducross. This is Sean Ducross. Move out of the way, Sean. We're the Ducross Brothers, the sports warriors. Believe it. Until next time, we're out.